spiritual ascent every climber needs to experience today. They say the climb is a physical challenge, but here in Cairn, it's a spiritual one. Today, we're tackling the first 8 walls of the tutorial, not just to learn the ropes, but to find what this mountain is trying to tell us. We've got keepsakes to find, and a journey that's only just beginning.
All I ever wanted was to touch eternity for an instant. To reach one of those rare moments of bliss, where everything seems in its place and you feel you're part of a whole. Do you know what I mean? Hey, Climbot, go ahead, answer.
Hey, Aava, it's Chris. Do you ever pick up the phone?
Hi, Chris. Sorry, look, I've not really got a whole lot of time to chat right now.
Absolutely. Just touching base to say we're good to go here. And I gotta tell you, we're all fired up. Rooting for you to become the first human to set foot on the summit of Kami.
Yeah, sure. Okay, gotta go. Just call me back. Come on, Climbot. I'm ready. Let's do this.
And hello everyone, welcome to Cairn. And today, I will be starting the first official playthrough of Cairn. And I will be starting this run in the Explorer difficulty to more effectively showcase the various assist mechanics, as well as demonstrating what the differences are between the assist being on and off in future runs as well. As actually before this, I had started my first initial experience learning and discovering Cairn and what Cairn is all about in the Alpinist difficulty. However, I only finished the tutorial and climbing the top of this wall, and then I will complete that playthrough at a later time. For now, I will continue and finish with this run through first. And growing up, actually in middle school, my first initial experience with rock climbing was actually while I was in middle school, and there was this closed off area in the gym that actually had a section of 5 different climbing walls, and the height was only about the height of wall 1 at most, just to be a bit more accommodating to middle schoolers at the time. And it was actually a fairly fun and interesting experience. And so here, I had actually gotten the water bottle and also some pocket change, which you'll actually be able to get some supplies in the vending machines, and you're only going to use the pocket change here. So there's also no point in holding on to it. So here I start at wall 3. This will be the highest distance you go at the basic level.
Come on.
And so this will be the first basic test of stamina. And since there's no actual stamina bar, one indicator of determining the level of stamina that Aava has is just based off of her rate of breathing. So here she's starting to cool down and relax a little more, so she'll be able to continue with the climb without tiring out much quicker.
Good.
And then there is actually a stretch mechanic in the game where Aava will automatically stretch depending on how you decide to extend her limbs. And so with the automatic controls using the game's inherent calculations, it seems to choose the best limb that it predicts should be used for the following movements. And so pretty much anything you see can be climbed, and they will have varying degrees of difficulty. And if I remember correctly, especially for competitions, usually when they go to these different gyms all around the world, there's usually a set path that has to be followed. I'm not sure if they're allowed to actually step on, the cracks you'll see on the walls themselves, but usually sticking to only placing their hands and feet on the appropriate colored holds. But for those who actually do rock climbing in the real world, in real life, how do you think this actually fares compared to the real deal? I know the rappelling is actually more realistic even when training, or I guess even for the beginner rock climbers, just for safety reasons, especially when going up the higher walls, because then you drop down from that height would still be, somewhat more challenging to really deal with. But for safety, so here I see the different assist settings. So there's the fall rewind, the infinite climbing gear resources, which I actually had off, as well as the autosaving. I wanted to keep the autosaving just for the convenience of time. So anytime you might want to leave, and you might have to leave at any time, there's no worry. So that's actually would be a good reason to actually play with just the Explorer mode with at least that assist on, which I feel is still fair. But most of the assists aren't going to be, changing the game mechanics in my experience with how the physics are regarded, or when doing or performing specific hand or foot placements. The particular assists don't really make an impact on that. And it seems you can actually climb to the top of the walls themselves. And it is actually beneficial, as well as there are collectibles, and even a keepsake that is the first keepsake you can find in the game, and it's only in the tutorial. But I will mention in the climbing gym that we had back, just a mini climbing wall, not really a climbing gym itself like this, but a much smaller, secluded, almost like closet-like room. And the handholds and footholds are just shaped variously more like this one here, but just more scattered, multicolored around the 5 sectional walls. And there's also a benefit I will mention. There is a benefit to completing all walls from 4 to 8, and that will be to provide some additional supplies when first starting off in the game, and that will be extremely useful, especially if you decide to pursue some other climbing challenges. And so there you can see how this would be one of the first major tests of stamina as well. And the holes are also against gravity. So in reality, it would actually be a challenging wall to complete, especially for a beginner, without being on a using any pins. If you try to go free solo, it would be challenging. Unless you're extremely athletic. And so here I was actually trying to stick to the red color for this wall instead of kind of being cheaty and climbing on the blue as well. So I tried to figure out what the best path was, and there it was kind of challenging for her left hand to automatically decide how to attach itself to the handhold. So I decided to take a slightly different approach and utilize some of the techniques I've seen some more advanced climbers use, where they adjust their feet placement and they can actually twist their body to change directions or gain additional height. However, in this game, there's no launching themselves from a lower position up, kind of like they just pull themselves up against gravity and they do this jump just to reach a higher height. This particular game, well, Cairn in its entirety won't have that ability, but I feel like if it were possible to patch it in like other climbing games do have, I think it would actually be fairly interesting to have that in Cairn. But I wonder if the reason the devs didn't really include it in the game is maybe it's trying to stay more true to the original spirit or tradition of rock climbing, rather than a more maybe freestyle approach. And again, here with Aava's breathing, you can generally gauge what her current stamina is like. And usually the grip that she currently has right there with her left hand. Usually that could be catastrophic for the... I wonder if it is catastrophic for the actual hand health over time, or if performing specific handholds or footholds actually consume more water and hunger. But for the sake of the tutorial, what I do know is you can sprint with the shift key to do a more of a speed walk movement, and it won't be detrimental to your health meter. And then there, 4B is complete. And that will be the first in the series that needs to be completed for the advanced training. And then if you position your hand just right on it, you can clip yourself in. But it does need to be in line with the clip holder, otherwise it will not work. And you might even risk a fall. And then going off belay, you can actually... You can regenerate your stamina and recover. And then coming up these walls, you can actually see what there is to collect. And I wonder if over there that was actually spare change, but I didn't go for it in this particular run of the tutorial. So I jumped, and then it kind of just considered it a fall. So I decided to just showcase what you can do with the fall rewind. And I had to kind of figure out how to rewind backwards. So I had to do like a series of clicks, or maybe with the shift key, maybe moving the WASD keys, and it would change the position where I wanted to rewind to. But there are some parts where you can't hit space to accept, and you can only accept it after a certain point. Here you can actually rappel down, you can actually jump down, or if the distance is long enough, you can actually hold the rope and you can hit Alt by default to just slide straight down. And here we'll be doing the next wall. It's it's wall 5, and there's no 5A or 5B, it's just 5. And this is also fairly good training for the main peak of Mount Kami. As this will probably be, like wall 5 I feel is probably going to be the most familiar. So if we try to climb various parts of Mount Kami, like it's the training gym, you can see ahead that for walls 6A and 6B, they actually feature the overhangs, where you aren't going to really encounter those early on, but they will still present themselves later on, especially if you want to do some of the... If you want to get some of the Steam trophies or Steam achievements, it will require you to climb some of those more daring paths. At most, they would only be red paths, but otherwise they're not going to be too detrimental. And beyond this tutorial, we will actually be able to see what the various difficulty levels are for the paths. And so at least I would say like a good portion, like a third, maybe even 2/4 of the way into the game, maybe not really halfway into the game, the highest difficulty might only be close to halfway, maybe a notch beyond halfway in terms of overall difficulty. Might be within the first 8, maybe 11 hours, depending on the routes you want to take, or if you have to make detours, maybe you want to search for different kind of resources. You might make your way to the higher difficulties after about 10 or 11 hours. And so if you experience a fall, but if you're able to use the pitons, you can actually ascend. Or even if you just decide to rappel down, you can also use that as a method to just rappel down to a lower ledge, and you can actually climb up to a higher height, rappel down, collect something, and then just rappel right back up. But there is a limited distance that your rope will actually go. And placing more pitons doesn't increase the overall distance. There's just a set distance, and you will see it indicated on the left side of the screen, usually above where the tab icon is with the eye. It'll be usually above that. You'll see a rope icon, and it'll tell you in red how much distance you have left to go before it reaches 0, and then you can no longer move.
Okay. Focus.
In that particular direction. And so here I was still utilizing the automatic hand and feet placement. And then there I got it. And then there I try to see if I could get up to the top using the manual adjustments there. Got my stamina. And then I just did the jump. And then just rappelling down slowly. And sometimes that's more useful than just doing the jump. Especially when you're on the shorter, thinner, more narrow cliffs. What I will also note is the difference between doing the Explorer run and the Alpinist is also that it is much easier to survive. So while it is still possible to run out or run low on certain resources, and that will then result in running low on food and water as well as temperature, So I would say the overall experience is still fairly similar. You can just go much longer without having to worry about having to fulfill those particular needs. But it does make the initial resource management a bit more difficult. I would say it would be a bit more challenging because you're using your resources a bit slower and you're probably gathering a lot more. So then you will have to end up using the various mechanics that are possible to be used in the backpack, which is a fairly unique backpack system for inventory management, which I will utilize later on in this part. And also for the different players and climbers who go to the gyms in real life, what kind of holds would you actually prefer route wise, especially when attempting the overhangs like this? Because there I try to get her to put both feet on the one foothold right there, but sometimes you'll notice on the more narrow ones it might not always be possible. But I will say that the amount of work that goes into calculating the best, or I guess what the game determines is the ideal limb to move, might not necessarily be the limb that you desire to move, especially where at least here in the Explorer difficulty mode, you can by default click the right mouse button and you can pretty much essentially rewind the last action that you did. So if you accidentally placed your limb somewhere incorrectly, you can then correct it again, and it comes at a lower risk when climbing without using any pigeons. However, in alpinist mode, by default all of the assists are disabled by default, but they can be adjusted. However, I don't think you're actually able to undo what you did if you misplace your handhold or foothold, unless you're just like nope, you don't want to move there. So you might want to use the most comfortable setting of manual control for your preferences. And for me, I just decided to utilize WASD, as I can just easily choose the highlighted limbs that I want to use, and that makes it a lot easier to see. And I also feel like it's a good kind of a quality of life setting. And then here, this is the first experience of a chimney climbing experience. And like the first time I tried this, the footholds were almost extremely awkward, as well as the handholds. And I was just trying to figure out the best places to use for handholds and for the footholds, since most of them are just a very smooth surface. But not impossible, just have to utilize the geometry to your advantage. And here we actually get a free pin. And these pins can only be utilized in either Explorer or the Alpinist difficulty level. And there is the Tenzen keepsake. It is the first keepsake available in the game, and the tutorial is also the only place where it can be obtained. But you can also hit 1 to access the backpack, and if you click on the keepsake icon, you hit the space key by default, and you'll be able to choose which keepsake you want to equip and display on your backpack, and it just hangs off your backpack, and you'll be able to see it in game in the world, which means that the artist had to have created a separate model for every single keepsake for itself, as well as what it looks like hanging off the backpack in game. And I try to not use any pins to descend downwards. And I just decided to jump down from there, and she's fine. And now I'm on the final wall. It is wall 8. And I think here I was around the 30-minute mark when attempting the 8th wall. And with less handholds, I had to decide where to actually place her feet, especially. And I also wasn't sure if the sloped angles were actually able to be used without slipping. So I tried to see how the stretch mechanic would work there. So I decided to utilize the manual settings there so I could actually move my feet instead of having it decide to move the arm instead. Got my stamina back. And then after resting up, I decided to progress. And apparently it seemed to work, and she seemed to actually like the particular holds. And then I had to actually transfer and transition over to the right. But even the training gym experience, I would say, is actually a pretty fun and unique experience, even though these walls are still easier than some of the walls I've seen some more advanced climbers climb in the more difficult gyms. So I feel like it's still a fair challenge even for beginners, but it's still highly doable. And there I had to decide where to place her feet. And she does experience a fall here. I didn't want to use the chalk or grip at this point, is entirely doable without it. And in the main game, the resources are still fairly abundant, but still finite. So here, this is where you can rewind. So it is extremely forgiving in the Explorer difficulty. So you can play mostly for a story-driven experience. So you don't have to actually worry about not being able to play the game and enjoying it for the story. And then here, I want to see how far she could stretch to attempt to climb to the top of this wall. And then she'll automatically get up when she's able to actually stretch to the top. And I decided to climb down rather than rappelling down, as sometimes some surfaces you might not be able to use any pins. So on the more dense rocky surfaces, you will need to actually traverse the terrain free solo style, regardless of the difficulty level played. And then here, it's a bit easier to actually climb down going at this much more relaxed pace.
Good.
I try to utilize the smaller cracks as the potential footholds, and I will say that it is more challenging initially to climb downwards, finding the appropriate handholds and footholds without slipping. It's much easier actually moving upwards, in my opinion, than it was moving downwards, as the legs are typically longer and they have to move a certain way rather than being pushed up with them instead to reach higher heights with the arm, rather than stretching the arm and trying to utilize the length of the leg to jump forward or to propel upwards or in a certain direction, left or right or diagonally. It's just moving downwards, leg first, and it feels a bit more difficult. And so utilizing the spare change that I found around the gym, you can actually get various supplies, and while they don't really give info, I would say preference wise I would go for either the water there or the, like, there's canned water. Some of them I think have different sodas as well as the energy drink, and the energy drink can also be utilized in an instant ramen recipe. But with the energy drink,
Climbot with double wall vacuum insulation that keeps your coffee warm. What are they going to come up with next?
and they also have music that can be interacted with. And this would be the first area you can interact with music, and then there's only maybe one other area in the game, and that's it. Usually it's better to go for something like the protein bar in my opinion, or some of the drinks, at least earlier on until you reach the first bodies of water or even other water sources. But some of the food in there can actually, it's a trade-off where you get hunger but you sacrifice a bit of your thirst.
"30 climbing attempts per year on average over the last 70 years. Not a single ascent of the summit. Return rate 40%. Cammy, you are really living up to your name."
And I was doing just one last sweep for any other resources that were in the gym that I may have missed.
Wow. I had no idea. That's crazy. She was so young, too.
A yellow yak would be good for a food recipe. Protein bar is fairly good. I feel it's better than the fruit jellies. And it's better than the, I think anything salted would actually sacrifice some thirst for hunger to an extent. And as far as I could see, none of those were utilized in any recipe so far. And they couldn't be cooked with. Also, the packaging size will matter in the backpack. And now I decided to tackle the wall now. And there's no backtracking to the tutorial area, so after this, that's it. Also, spend any spare change that you collected, as there's no use for them after the outside of the tutorial.
Put up with that entire film crew for a month to make this stupid documentary. Another one of Chris's genius ideas. The perfect opportunity to get some exposure. Yeah, well, he didn't have a camera in his face the whole time.
And then this is one of the funny experiences I had where she just automatically tried to go towards the floor instead of up the wall, and then the automatic placement just had her do that. And as the first official rock face that could be climbed in the tutorial area, you can actually now see that based on the art style, which features a more bold, kind of sharp cell shaded graphic or art style, makes it easier to see which areas would be suitable for the handholds or footholds, given the way the physics mechanics are utilized in Cairn. And so I try to get it in that crack for better stability, and then I could see that I had to transition over to the upper right. And it's quite interesting to see how we as humans can actually adapt and maybe have this foresight or anticipation, maybe even this insight of where we want to actually move, or let's see, we could see how well they actually play out in reality. And then we consider how the developers program the game to actually calculate for the human anticipation, like the kind of almost the human foresight that we have at any given time, which is fairly interesting. If there was actually any programming like that, which really does show that the game is more intricate than it seems on the surface in terms of how the mechanics are introduced in the game. And while the sound of the radio of the boombox is now out of earshot, the only sound that I could actually hear now it's pretty much just the ambient nature sounds, such as the wind against the rock. And now it's literally just me and the rock. And there you see how I adjusted the foot placement automatically, but either place that they were at, I would say, is actually fine, and it wouldn't actually risk her amount of stamina.
Finally.
Here it is. And here you can actually utilize the photo mode, and there are various different controls. So if you like, you can actually enjoy the various controls, such as the free camera, different variations of tilt, camera speed, cinematic frames, as well as changing the weather cycles, and even Aava's expressions and poses themselves. And then you can also hide the UI to take more immersive screenshots. I can change various settings such as Aava's posture, her facial expression, what the robot displays in the world, and you can choose to toggle on or off the staff light. And then here we can actually play with some of the filter effects and then lighting effects, which I didn't really mess around with. Went back to the environment effects so you can see the different times of day. And then here you can actually see the path that you had taken to actually get to your current position. And so that's the route that I had taken to get up the mountain, to get up this rock face. And one thing to note is also the weather does affect how easy it is to actually climb in the game, and it does affect the overall grip that you will have, especially during the rainy weather as well as very windy weather. They will all play a major part on your overall grip. And now we are starting this part of the game. Just right out of the gym area of the tutorial. We are actually still in the tutorial right now. But we can collect the raspberries. And I actually got one of my first Steam achievements, which was, well, at least for this playthrough. And that was just accessing the map from that.
Oh, again? Who's it now? Chris? Naomi? Don't pick up. I'll take care of it later.
From the extended map view. And so there are various resources around the world, such as these plants that grow in specific areas. Sometimes they'll also grow on the rock faces themselves. You'll have to climb up to them to collect them. And here's a water source, so you can actually fill any container that you may have, such as bottles or like glass jars, for instance. Or you can actually drink straight from the water source themselves, which is also a great quality of life feature, I would say. So it doesn't require a container to actually be able to fulfill any needs. And I try to decide which path would actually be the most ideal to take. So while I realized that this area that she's climbing up currently was actually slightly angled diagonally, but then at the same time I also had to transition over to the right just to get up, and then I had to use the branching cracks just to climb up as well. And then I found out I had to transition over to the... I had to go up before I could even go left.
Oh, yeah.
And then here I had to, it's like not really a chimney per se, but there is a slight gap where I tried to traverse the rock face here and try to get her left foot over to the small little notch right here, and then try to transfer over using her right leg and then grabbing on with the left arm, the left hand, while trying to get her right leg to get a good foothold. There is one right down below. Might be kind of hard to see, but it's a little bit below where her foot currently was. And then from here I was able to climb up to the top of this rock face, as I decided to take the route on the right side. And she was almost there. And so while waiting for her breath to recuperate, I decided to then try to get a foothold where I could on this kind of slanted area. And it seemed to work, even though it didn't seem like it was the best foothold. But as long as it isn't slippery, usually the grip will be fine. Then here there was it wasn't quite an overhang, but kind of a part of the rock that was hanging slightly over, so I had to find a way to somehow get her to reach over that. But it didn't seem like it was too bad a feel. If she was able to stretch her arm up to the top, she'd be able to pull herself up just like that. And here I was looking at the route to see everywhere that I went, which is indicated by the dotted lines, as well as the colored route, which is the route I took to climb up. Up to where I currently am. Got the thistle. And then a short break spot where you literally just use it to see the scenery, and allows you to do a kind of, well, you can't really take a photo with that unless you do a screenshot from your, it would be like a Windows or your OS screenshot. Or if you close out of this, you can do photo mode and then change her posture to be continue with sitting down, so it's almost like she's still in the same position she is during the short break, but that allows you to use photo mode to screenshot, take a look at the next route that I wanted to take. And I wanted to go over here to the left side just to see if there was anything I might have missed that might have been noteworthy. And while I didn't go for the honey route for this particular playthrough, I did get the Gentian there. And then perhaps in a future run, perhaps during the second run, I will go for the slightly more, well, it's not necessarily more difficult as indicated by the map route difficulty, but it will come with the advantage of getting 2 different types of honey. So there's also the beehive up here where you can get kind of a honey stick, and then if you go to the beekeeper's quarters, you can pretty much get this jar of honey as well as another honey stick. And then there, like later on, there's also one other honey spot to get a honey stick. I tried to look up to see how I would get up this particular rock face, so I decided to start right about here and maybe like kind of traverse the terrain that way to get to the right side. Or if I actually got up onto the ledge where the short break was and get a running start, I might have been able to latch on to the part at the right there. Or I could have climbed up this route as well, where I currently am at. And this is the choice that I had gone with at this time, just for this particular run here. I actually try to get a right hand to grab along the right edge, and then try to get both legs to have a more stable spot without affecting her breath as much or depleting her stamina as much. whether you use the automatic or the manual limb controls, you can actually climb as quickly as you would like, because as long as you are able to get a good handhold or foothold, you can theoretically climb up faster than you would normally think is possible to actually climb in this game. But you can actually speedrun the entire game along the more difficult routes, even in under about an hour and 13 minutes. And if you want to move quicker through the map, you can actually, by default, if you use a keyboard, by default you can use the control key to get the running start, space to jump, and you can actually move much faster that way instead of having to use the default shift control to just do kind of a speed walking movement. So that is something that I will try to use more often during the next run, since I do get the same healing items that I started with in this run, and I haven't really needed any of those healing items as often as I thought I might have, especially with the fair use of the pins that are available. And here I saw the nettles, the nettle plants, and one of the things that you can do with it, even in real life, you can blanch them so it helps reduce the kind of pines that are on them, and it's hence the name nettles. They're kind of like stinging nettles, and they would cause this kind of numbing sensation if you try to eat it raw. So you would like kind of a tingly sensation on your tongue if you try to eat it raw. So blanching the leaves first kind of helps reduce that sensation, so it's more palatable to ingest, and you can use it in a salad, for example. And then here I wanted to actually make some chalk, so I got the plastic waste there to then be kind of composted and reused and repurposed back into usable chalk. And then I decided to use the shake up bag feature in the inventory using the default C key to create more room in the bag, especially since sometimes the bag will look like it still has plenty of room for collecting other objects, and then you'll actually see this kind of red stop sign that shows that it's not really a stop sign like as seen in here in the US, but it's kind of like this this red no sign that says that you cannot do this action, even though theoretically you should have the inventory space available. So with the C key, or even manually readjusting the position of the objects, you can rotate them as you like, as you see fit, and also drag and drop them anywhere you want in your bag, at least during the first 2 difficulty levels. And you can also do it to an extent in free solo. However, the overall inventory is significantly reduced So since the focus of free solo will be to complete it as quickly as possible, and resource management will also be crucial, so it's more beneficial during a free solo run to find the objects and use them as you find them, rather than holding on to them until the very end. And also there's no light, and you also don't have any pins to use, so you don't really get a climb with your full gear in free solo as you normally would during Explorer or the Alpinist difficulty modes. And so here I try to find a way to climb up this this rock tower here. Is kind of mini. It's a much shorter tower of rock that is much shorter than the variety that's presented further up the mountain, as we will see eventually. But it's also one of the first best places to get a running start, to also get additional Steam trophies if that's what you're looking for. Especially for the trophy where you have to get a running start and you have to jump and latch onto another rock face. And this is one of the first best ways to do so, but I feel you can also do it a little bit earlier on, as even right now I'm still technically in the Tenzen tutorial area of the game, and this isn't even the beginning of the main game yet. So this technically isn't even Mount Cam yet. But as this is also my first official run through the game, aside from what I had tried previously, I'd become a little more acquainted with the movement, especially with how her hands and feet try to move automatically, especially if you want to try to move them as quickly as possible. But otherwise, manual is the most reliable method of moving, especially if you want to move as quickly as possible. And apparently she actually liked that particular hold there.
Okay, good.
And then here, especially as a more of a beginner climber, is like if I were to actually try to do this with safety provided in real life, I'd probably be taking it slow just like this, just for the sake of being able to not only enjoy the experience of climbing, but also to, you know, make it back safely, of course. However, I would also, in real life, probably place as some climbers will mention, the pins were a much older method of protection, but now to be less invasive to the natural rocks, they have these different devices that they use now, which are then, instead of being drilled into rocks or hammered in, more likely they now have to find these cracks that they can fit their devices into, and then you have to pull to secure them, and then they only hold up to specific amounts of weight, and some of them can essentially even hold up to numerous thousands of pounds, which I feel is actually kind of amazing, even if it's literally just supporting the weight of one person. And then I also placed a pin for safety there just in case, so if I were in the case of a fall, there would be less risk of me actually hitting the ground, as in real life, the purpose of the protection in the first place is to not only stay off the ground, but also to not come in contact with the ground in any way after a fall, if a fall were to occur.
Good.
Then I had to transfer over to the left side. I tried to find the best way to transition her arm positioning so I could then start to pivot her legs over to gain additional height. And then she was able to climb just like that. And then here where it tells you to finally start to get a running start. This is the first part of the tutorial that instructs the player on how to get a running start. And here I wasn't really sure how to jump off, because it says control, like it says hold control plus space to take a running start, but you actually only need to hit control to get the running start, and space actually makes you jump. And that's why I put another pin there So I wouldn't have to, if in the case of a fall, I could just climb back up the cliff face and try again, rather than having to climb up further again, because the second pin I had placed on this pillar here was still barely midway down, and it would take much longer to climb back up again. So here you'll see that I actually fall a couple times trying to figure out how to actually jump, and it's the space bar that makes Aava jump. So here it didn't work because I hit control and I was holding control and space at the same time, and that just made her drop instead of jumping. So you only press space when you want to jump at the point you want to jump from, rather than pushing them at the same time. So it's more of you hold control first and then you jump when you want to. So I fell again because I also still wasn't sure how it was working in terms of the timing. And then there it actually worked, and I was able to get the Ain't Scared Steam achievement down there.
Come on.
And now I'm finally at the very top of the Tenzen tutorial here. I hit the default queue to recall the pin that I had placed, and as indicated by the now ambient music, it indicates that you are now near the end of the tutorial, and it's the precursor to transitioning to the Mount Kami area, which is now the main game. And you'll have the option to either restart the entire training, starting back over from the gym all the way back to the top of the Tenzen area, or you can then transition into the main game. And here I actually just wanted to do photo mode so I could see the night sky, which was a pretty nice sight. I just wanted to see the sceneries around for the first main run of the game. And then the focus for the future runs would be to complete the different routes also much quicker, and perhaps to also collect some of the honey which provided some decent buffs. Although even the grip type of buffs that would be available wouldn't really necessarily be a requirement for climbing. Although it does help with climbing faster, as well as having kind of the rush, or this kind of, indicated by a figure just dashing or running. It indicates that you're able to climb much faster, but you can also do the speed walking action much faster. And I also wonder if it helps get an even faster running start, or if the running start only has a set speed. So I actually got 13 pins there. And here we are.